Hey Flippers, welcome back to another video. If it is your first time here, go ahead and click the like button and the subscribe button so you can stay up to date on any other content that we put out. But today we're going to be talking with health insurance expert Carey Blackburn. She herself is also an artist and has been through the struggle of trying to find health insurance and not having health insurance. So this is my hour-long conversation with Carey in which we're going to break down everything about health insurance and what you need to know. Enjoy.
Hello, financial flippers. I feel like we've done this already before, but we did this earlier today. So we're going to do it again because there's so much information jam-packed into this topic of health insurance. So this is Health Insurance 2.0. We're going to talk about some of the same things, but it's still the same purpose. We're going to answer a lot of your questions because there's a lot of people that are in a position that they haven't been before of actually picking out their health coverage and what does that mean and what do all these terms mean and that kind of stuff. So we are going to dive into that today. And to dive into that, we are going to invite our expert, Carey Blackburn. Welcome.
Hey y'all, thanks so much for having me, Kyle.
Yeah, you're welcome. How you doing?
I'm doing great, kind of ready to dive into all of this that has given me so much trouble in all of my time of being a performer. So I'm excited to relay the things I've learned.
Well, you are not the only one, and I know people are excited to hear what you have to say. So why don't you give us a little bit of your background and your story?
Yeah, definitely. So I graduated from the musical theater program I went to in 2017. And then for the next 2 years, I was uninsured because I had been on the school health insurance plan, just to talk a little bit about my experience with insurance. But
Sure.
so I had been working contracts, freelance, on and off, like most people do when you're straight out of a program. And then it really wasn't until I worked for Disney in Japan that I was like, wow, wait, I forgot how much it ruled to be able to go to the doctor and not think about it so hard and not think that it was going to be this crippling expense or take a whole week of my paycheck. So then I was like, wow, I'm going to look into this more. And sure enough, I was eligible for more help than I ever knew that I needed. But so that's part of what motivated me to get into this after doing some freelance work with my family insurance business that I had always preferred to do my performing, but then I learned that I can do both because doing it also rules. So I'm still a performer. This is something that I do in my free time and the free time that has grown exponentially since March. So
Right. Yeah, for most of us. Well, yeah, I mean, as somebody who else, I was uninsured for a number of years. I mean, it's probably embarrassing to admit how many years I was probably uninsured, but for the same reasons, because we just think that it's this impossible thing to achieve, getting your own health coverage and what that means. And when there are so many options and when there's so much information, people just get overwhelmed and scared, and then they just, at least that's what I do, and I shy
oh
away from it, and
gosh, yeah.
I don't want to deal with it. So to start, let's talk about health insurance basics. So what are some health insurance basics?
Yeah, so some basics that you're going to want to know about any plan as you're looking at it, specifically on the marketplace where they can be compared side by side. So some of the big things that you're going to see are the premium, and that's just the monthly cost that it's going to come out of your bank account every month or that you'll pay online. And that is just what it costs to keep a plan in motion. That's all. So then your copay is going to be, you go to the doctor and then you think about when you go to the little window at the end and you hand the nice person, $50 and then you leave and say, have a great day. That's your copay. That's just the flat rate that it costs to go to your doctor. It doesn't contribute toward your deductible, which we'll get to in a second. So I really want to stress the difference between copay and coinsurance because I really didn't know the difference. So the copay is that flat rate, and then the coinsurance is the percentages that you'll see when a plan is broken down. They'll be like 75-25, 80-20, 90-10 if you're looking at like a platinum plan. So that's once you meet your deductible, that is what percentage your insurance is going to pay of covered expenses after that until you reach your maximum out of pocket. So that deductible, I think of it as like the button that has to get pushed before that co-insurance percentage is going to go into effect. So before your deductible, you're going to be paying out of pocket. And then once that deductible hits, then it'll be your co-insurance percentage. And then once you hit your maximum out of pocket, the insurance pays everything else. So your maximum out of pocket is, think of it as if you were to get into a car accident or something else that involved a really lengthy stay at a hospital, that's going to be your maximum out of pocket. So those are the things that are going to come up just as you're comparing plans side by side. And then for types of plans, there are a few different things that you can go by, and especially depending on what kind of contracts you take. If you're a performer, it can be key to look at those. So an HMO is going to be the smallest network. It's going to be the most restrictive in that you can only go to in-network providers. And if you want to go to a specialist, you will need a referral from your primary care provider, which is what most people consider their family doctor. So because of those things and because there are less providers, an HMO is usually going to be a lot more affordable than like a PPO or a POS plan. So especially if you plan on staying in the same place for that whole year, an HMO could be a really great fit for you, especially if they have a specialist copay built in. But yeah, we'll get to those. So then on the other side of the extremes, there's a PPO, which is going to be a way broader network. And a lot of times those will give you the freedom to go across multiple states if you think that you might be taking a contract out of town or something. For reference, the Actors Equity Association plan usually is an HMO, but they have a rule that if you were to get cast on a tour, you can convert over to the PPO plan for free as like a special enrollment period. So those are great if you just want to have freedom over where to go. You don't need referrals to go to specialists. Those are, however, going to be a good bit more expensive. And then a POS is going to be right in the middle of the two of those. You can have a primary care provider if you'd like. There's in-network and out-of-network costs. And again, it's going to be about right in the middle price-wise. And if you see EPO plans, those are going to be similar too. But yeah, those are the main things that I wanted to establish like off the bat just before.
Well, because those are all those little bitty letters that show up that you go, I don't even know what these letters mean. Exactly. So at least gives us a place to start. So the basics of health insurance. So now if we're actually going in and choosing a plan, walk us through like what those, as we say, those points of concern that we need to pay attention to.
Definitely. So in a very broad sense, if you are just someone going in thinking, I need to get insurance, I don't know where to start, you can go with the marketplace, which is Obamacare coverage. It's the Affordable Care Act. All of that is the same thing. So that's going to be the healthcare.gov website that you can go in, type in your income, see what's available in your area. There's also the short-term or the private health insurance market that is going to be unregulated plans. So there are a few things that the Affordable Care Act laid out as far as particularly pre-existing conditions that it means they have to be covered. You can't be asked questions about them. However, if plans are off the exchange, like short-term plans, they don't have to comply with those rules at all. So,
and just to clarify real quick, when you say off the exchange, we mean not within the marketplace.
Right.
So that would be a separate private plan.
Yes, that's the short-term off exchange. These are all, they're absolutely so
lots of terms. Right.
So those are going to be, if you're healthy, but make too much for the marketplace. And the marketplace, that threshold is going to be between $12,760 for 2021 and like 50,041, I want to say. So it's between 100% and 400% of the federal poverty level for that year. So then what if you don't make 100% of the federal poverty level, which I'm going to be totally transparent, has been the case for me, especially when I was working at an apprentice at a theater. Just sure was not making that much. So that is when, if your state has the Medicaid expansion, you could apply for Medicaid. And if your state does not have the Medicaid expansion, you would not. And generally, the Southeast does not have the Medicaid expansion, like as a rule. I'm going to be putting a Google Doc of helpful info and links and sources that I used for this. And one of them is going to be a Medicaid expansion map so that you can look at what research your state legislature has done on the Medicaid expansion, if it's like maybe going to happen someday or not at all. So if that's the case, you're within the Medicaid gap, which is a really, really freaking tough space to be. And I've definitely got some kind of holistic ways to get around that and make sure that you can keep your costs down, but you're not going to be able to find something on the plan for marketplaces unless you are paying out of pocket, which is the same thing you would be doing if you made above that amount as well. So now that we have those things in mind, just with the income you think you might have, which direction you think you might be going. And just to be totally transparent, I really don't work with short-term plans. I'm licensed to sell them, but it's not what most of the artists that I know are looking into. So it's not really my area of expertise. I can definitely answer questions on it, but it's not usually what I'm hashing out with people who are just trying to figure out how to make this jigsaw puzzle work.
Sure. Well, your audience is a very different audience. I mean, that's what I was in New York, right out of college, and you're not working, and then maybe you have insurance, but it might just be like a life insurance benefit from this restaurant that pays you $2 an hour, and you're not really sure.
It's too real. Yes.
Yeah.
Totally.
So there's definitely a lot of people that need that kind of thing. So those are points of concern to think about, especially that the income level, and we talked a little bit about that in the other video too. But that's definitely something to consider. But going into and touching on Medicaid that you were talking about, that Medicaid gap is between
it's between 0 and 12,760 for next year for your projected income for 2021. So how do you calculate your projected income for a certain year as someone who may be taking a contract 2 weeks in advance or 6 months in advance, or maybe a pandemic hits and your industry is shut down? So a big thing to think about as far as the marketplace goes and for subsidies, to remember is that it is an advance on a tax credit. So if you don't think you're going to meet that threshold and your state does not have Medicaid, don't risk it, because you will have to pay that tax credit back if you don't turn out to be qualified for it the next year as you file your taxes. The same as if you make too much. So a big thing is just to project that income. And then if you have an income change and you really don't think you're going to meet that threshold, to get in touch with the healthcare marketplace and say, hey, I've had an income change. I don't think I'm going to be able to do this anymore. This is my cat, Frances. There she went. So that's a really big thing that I just want to stress to people, that the Medicaid gap is so real and it can be a really crippling amount of expenses, even just in that placed between 11,000 and 12,760. Like, it doesn't even matter how close you are if you don't reach it. So just keep that in mind, especially if you're like, maybe not sure, you probably will get it, but aren't positive. Just really make sure to keep tabs on that as the year goes on. It's not as scary as I'm making it sound, but I also don't want it. I don't want anyone.
Well, you don't want that to creep up as to be a surprise for somebody, and that's something else that I agree with. I think that there's a way to be compassionate, but we also have to tell the truth when we're doing that, and that's why we're doing this, is to actually tell people the truth about these things.
Yeah.
So you're talking about subsidies. So let's talk about this subsidy thing, because if you do make more and you say you owe that tax credit back, essentially that full premium, whatever that was, if you had it for the entire year and you were over even by $500, you owe that full thing back.
Correct. So,
and it comes out of your taxes, right?
So
okay.
It's going to work kind of like, if you'll remember the $1,200 check that people got, that was technically an advance on the tax credit, and no one really was totally sure how it worked. So this is going to be similar in that you will project your income for 2021, and that's what makes it different from a lot of even food stamps or other kind of aid plans that you can look into are going to look at your taxes from the year prior, but this is not like that. If you had a contract that paid something totally different this year, but next year you think you might be on unemployment, that's what you're looking at, just your future. So one thing that you can do with that is to look at not using the entire tax credit at once. Just like, to be totally open, I qualified for a plan that was about, I think it was $18 a month for this past year, but I didn't know if I would make a little bit more than that. I don't go to the doctor a lot. I did not get a super comprehensive plan, so don't expect that amount.
Right, that's unique.
Right. So, but I opted to pay about $30 a month so that if I made more, I wouldn't get like a surprise at tax season. So, especially if you're someone who has a lot of 1099s and usually counts on having more costs than refunds at tax season, it can be really helpful to pay a little bit more monthly than you need to. And then if you've overpaid, you'll get that as a refund on your taxes instead of worrying about maybe having to pay more. In the same way, you can not use any of the tax credit if you're financially in that spot, and you can pay the full amount of the plan per month and then just get like a huge tax refund next year, depending on what you ended up making. So all of those are options to you if you're going to be using the marketplace. And what the marketplace subsidy is based off of, we're saying projected income. So it's going to be your modified adjusted gross income, which is basically just your adjusted gross income, which again, I have a link to that in the Google Doc I'm going to send out, which is like a calculator for you personally, but it's generally going to be your income minus any self-employed deductions or student loan interest or retirement contributions. That's the other thing. So if you have those, make sure to take that little bit off the adjusted income because you'll get more of a subsidy for it. And then on that note, especially for self-employed individuals or people who are doing a lot of contract work, you do have some options to further adjust your modified adjusted gross income to meet that threshold. If, say, like, you're floating around 51,000 and you're like, man, I really want to be able to qualify. you can do a few extra things like put that money into an HSA for that year, which will then make it deductible off of your modified adjusted gross income. So there are a few little adjustments you can make that will, if you're right on the edge there, will kind of bring you back down. But yes,
those are great little tips and tricks too. Yeah, just to if you're so close. But I'm kind of like you. I err on the side of caution. So if you're really that close and you already feel like if your gut's telling you I
not
then you're
sure.
probably gonna make over that, and
Yeah.
and it's better to be safe because the last thing you want to do is have to owe all of that back in your taxes.
Right.
So what about for those people who don't qualify for those subsidies? What options do they have?
Yeah, so as I touched on a little bit before, the main thing
Mhm.
is going to be short term or off exchange or private plans. Again, all being the same thing. The one I work with is National General, but there are a few other companies that do that too. So those, again, are going to be suitable for if you do not have any kind of pre-existing conditions that are going to be relevant, things that are going to show up generally on like a 2-year look back. So say you had, because someone I worked with had this happen. So say you had a knee injury happen when you were in high school. That is not considered a pre-existing condition. Like that was fixed, it's over. However, 15 years later, it got infected and she ended up having to be out of work for 4 months because of it. Now that is a huge pre-existing condition, and any kind of short-term plan is going to exclude any kind of treatment related to that for as long as they cover that person. So some other things are like diabetes is a huge one that people are going with. Also, anxiety and depression. They are pre-existing conditions, which also means that if pre-existing conditions are not protected any longer under a certain legislature, then that is something that people will have to deal with any plan they go with. And we'll talk about that a little bit more when it comes to mental health coverage, but I definitely didn't know about the prescription look back with things like short-term plans. So they'll even look at like, if you're changing medications a lot for depression meds, they will not consider it as well managed. So if you're going to be going with a plan like that, just know that they're really going to be looking for stuff like that that shows up in the past few years that they can exclude. So that's
Which is why it's so important to be if somebody's working with you or someone like
Mhm.
Carey that they're being upfront and honest with
Yes.
all of this information to
Oh my
actually tell you
gosh,
the truth, because
for
you
sure.
can't help them if you don't know.
Yeah, and you could end up recommending something that is actually totally wrong for them. And
Mhm.
I have to be honest, when I was coming out of college and I had definitely undergone treatment for anxiety, I had no idea that that was going to be a pre-existing condition if I looked at that kind of health plan. So I probably wouldn't have been upfront if I was working with a broker about it. So it's just, again, key to like take that step and be vulnerable, and also work with someone that you trust so that you feel comfortable doing that and just talking with them openly. And this is going to apply to your doctor too. Just being very honest about what you're working with and what you need so that
Yeah,
something like that doesn't happen.
gosh, it's super important.
Yeah.
So some other options if you don't qualify for subsidies. Uh, Obviously, we talked about the short term. There's other unions.
Yes.
Uh,
So a big one is the freelancers union.
which I've never heard of before. I've never heard of
Yeah.
the freelancers union.
So they do have group coverage. It's not in every area, but if you go on their website, you can enter your zip code, see if they have group plans near you. And then if that's the case, you can get on a group plan. Generally, group plans get you a lot more for your dollar than an individual or family plan. Also, the Photographers of America, if If you do photography, like if you're a headshot photographer as your side hustle, that is totally something to look into. Also, your local chamber of commerce. If you are self-employed or have any other kind of like side hustle or something that you do, it does cost money to join the local chamber of commerce. But first of all, you get access to group health coverage probably, and you're also just investing in your community, and you can make connections with other small businesses near you. And there's advertising opportunities too. So if that's something that's right for you, there can be a whole lot of benefits that way. Also, the Farm Bureau, like, go with me here.
I'm going to go with you on this one because I'm really confused.
You don't have to be a farm. So this surprised me too, but that's also going to be in the Google Doc. You can look up the Farm Bureau near you and see if your business or sole proprietorship is qualified. And they'll have health plans too. So a lot of it is just looking into different business organizations near you. There's also cost sharing plans through like religious organizations, or like groups of lawyers will have it if, say, your spouse works in law or you do on the side and you're just killing it. So you definitely have options. Again, it's just being creative, which of course, that's something
Right.
we're all great at, but just doing that little bit of extra research if you are in that situation where you don't qualify for subsidies, you definitely have options, and they are worth looking into, just depending on what's offered locally.
And it's important to look into that stuff too, because it's the goal of insurance is to cover the big stuff, and that
Right.
$500,000 bill that you weren't expecting, but who expects that? We want to make sure that that's covered. So don't deny yourself that coverage,
Absolutely.
just because it scares you with overwhelming options and all that kind of stuff. That's really great.
Exactly.
All right, so we're gonna change gears just a little bit.
Yeah.
But now let's talk about the difference between an FSA versus an HSA,
Oh my
and
gosh.
where do I put my money, and what do I do? And I'm confused about all of them. It's just more letters. So walk us through it.
It sure is. So I'm going to be totally honest. I'm not totally sure why they both still exist, because they are so similar for most people. There are a few key differences. One of the main ones being, also both of them are employer offered generally, except for you can get an HSA plan if you get a bronze level on the marketplace, which is going to be the ones with low premium costs but high deductible costs. So if that's something that's right for you, which it's definitely not right for everybody. But an FSA is that year specific, and an HSA is forever. So FSA money, if you put it in, it'll be available immediately. Like, your entire contribution for the year will be available immediately, as long as you've put in what you're going to contribute each paycheck. However, if you put $600 in it and you only use 100 of it, tough luck. It goes away, poof. It's optional for employers to allow a $500 FSA rollover. I haven't personally seen one, so for sure check with your employer. And then HSA you can use for qualified medical expenses up until age 65. And then you have more options. You can use it on monthly health insurance premiums, things like that. But generally the same things are available for them as far as qualified costs. So how to think about it is anything that's going to come out of your pocket, like over-the-counter drugs, cough drops, menstrual products. You can get an at-home COVID-19 test with an FSA or HSA right now. So you can't get masks. I looked at it for this very broadcast. You can't get them. but it was worth a shot. Or any kind of out-of-pocket healthcare costs, like those copays we were talking about. If you have to pay a copay, if you have to pay for something out of pocket. Some people will also use their HSA or FSA to pay for mental health care, like to pay for their therapy appointment, because the main benefit of it is that it's your money and it's not taxed. So you can save whatever your tax rate is by putting that money into an HSA or an FSA. The only thing about it is restricted on what you can use it on. So again, there will be a calculator, but what you're going to want to do for this is calculate the times you think you will probably have to go to the doctor this year, the times you think you will have to go to the dentist this year, if there's any kind of over-the-counter like allergy medicine you take, how much you're going to spend on that. So just adding up all of those costs, which, as we know, they add up really fast and can be a lot. So again, it's just an extra little amount of homework that can save you free money. It's just a matter of really putting down on paper what you expect your costs to be that year, especially if you're planning on having something done that's going to be big out-of-pocket costs. Like, oh my gosh, if you're going to get like an MRI and you haven't looked into it in your plan, which like for sure look into it in your plan, we'll get to that in a second. And you're going to have to pay out of pocket for that. And it's going to be, $250. It can really help to have that at least come out of your tax-free contribution. Yeah. So that's the things on FSA versus HSA.
Perfect. Yeah, I know it's tricky, and they are so similar, and
yeah.
And they are a great account, to kind of diversify your portfolio, especially if we're talking about long-term planning and all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of options with that, but you have to know that it's right for you in your situation and what it is that you're going to need coverage-wise. So those are not for everybody, but it's good to clarify those. So let's step into kind of the small business owners. We have some small business owners in the group, I know. And some of them have talked about, like, if I'm going to put a plan in place and then I'm going to add team members later, are there options or anything like that? But anyway, walk us through health insurance for small business owners.
Yes. So there are a few different things to keep in mind if you're looking at that as a small business owner, and also a small business owner versus being self-employed. So, and sometimes those go hand in hand, sometimes they don't, like, especially depending on how many people you add. So you're eligible for group coverage once you have 2 people. So you can employ anyone, but they cannot be a spouse or a family member. So, and a big downside about the Affordable Care Act really was that it kind of cut out a lot of mom and pop shops because they couldn't get group health insurance because they
were related.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow,
so
okay.
If the person that you're hiring is your spouse, you will not be eligible for group insurance, which is a big bummer. But it also can be really expensive if you only have 2 people. I will say a rule about group insurance is they are looking at the size of the group, and they can't ask individual health questions about people within the group. So if you have someone within your small business who has like a lot of health costs, this can be a really great way for them to get coverage without having to be asked questions, no matter what the state of the marketplace is, because those are going to be renewable term plans that you can add on every year without people having to prove good health or insurability. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. Other than that, it's really when you start adding more full-time employees, and I think Kyrie said this earlier too, that like once it gets to around 5 people is when it starts making more sense financially to get on a group plan. But then also, while you're self-employed, a really big thing, and this is also absolutely something to talk to your accountant about, because it changes year to year. But I also want to make all the small business owners and self-employed individuals aware of this, is there is a self-employed health insurance premium deduction. So
A self-employed health premium deduction.
and the premium is
Okay.
that monthly cost. So to give an example, if you're self-employed, you're killing it, you are absolutely making over that $50,000, you can, depending on the year, deduct those monthly costs if you're paying, say, $600 a month for health insurance, for you as a self-employed individual. You can also deduct qualified healthcare expenses if they exceed, I believe it is 7.5% of your modified adjusted gross income. Again, I've attached a source on that. It looks like for 2021, people will be able to deduct those health insurance premiums if they're self-employed, from everything I've been able to find on the IRS website. So that can be a huge relief for people who are self-employed, not qualifying for subsidies, because those monthly costs can rack up fast. So that is absolutely something to look into. Talk to your accountant about it. See if it's right for you. I think it will be, but I'm not a tax professional. So then also, if you are going to have employees, you can deduct any premiums that you are paying for those employees, as a necessary business expense. So even though you are required to pay a certain amount of their premiums, you can deduct that from your taxes for your small business. So the costs aren't quite as big as it seems, even though it's absolutely still an investment, but it's also a really worthwhile investment in the people who are working for your company, and to show them that they can really put their trust in you to take care of them. Also, if you say want to hire people, but you're not making a ton right now, or your business isn't making a ton right now, it's right at the beginning. So there's also a marketplace for small businesses that is called the Shop Marketplace. And it's going to be really similar to the individual marketplace, only it's going to be for group plans. So if you just want to look at your options and see what might be available to you, I totally recommend going on healthcare.gov and figuring out what the shop plans look like. Because it's pretty quick and can just get an idea of what you're looking at, especially if you can get some kind of subsidy or help.
Well, I don't think there's anything wrong with shopping around and knowing your options, which is why we're talking to health brokers and not captive agents today, so that they have a broader range of options for you to choose from. Okay, so we talked about this, or you touched on it a little bit earlier, but we want to circle back to this because this is, like you said, it's something that people probably don't think about unless they're already going through something like this.
Exactly.
But mental health coverage is a big portion of health insurance in general.
It sure is. So, and it also permeates to other types of insurance. If you're looking at life insurance, you'll find that they ask you if you've been diagnosed with anxiety or depression, and how many times that you've changed medicines, things like that. It's really something that insurance companies look at, which I personally think that a big step in normalizing mental health care is removing those things as pre-existing conditions, since it's kind of like a maintenance that a lot of us have to go through at some point, but that's for another time. So, so your out-of-pocket expenses are something big to keep in mind, because to look at most mental health professionals are considered specialists under Affordable Care Act plans, but it is absolutely worth it to go in and make sure. You can also filter when you're looking at the website by doctor. So if there's any doctor that you really like and you want to like keep going to that counselor, you can type in their name and it'll filter plans that way, which I find to be super duper helpful. But if, say, you're getting a plan that doesn't have a specialist copay, but you're getting one of those like high deductible plans, you're going to be paying for those visits out of pocket. And if that's the case, you might want to put how many visits you're going to take into that HSA. If you have a high deductible account, calculate how many times you think you're going to want to go to this counselor, put that money in, and then use that for those visits. Because cost is one of the really big barriers keeping people from getting mental health coverage. So it's hard, but again, it just like takes some planning. So there's also other ways that you can go about it. Also, some people choose this because they would rather not have something that is considered a pre-existing condition logged on with their insurance as something that they've claimed for, which again is not an issue right now with the Affordable Care Act, but especially in the past year, as people have been nervous about what pre-existing conditions will or won't be covered, some people have preferred to, even if they do have insurance, seek that care outside of their plan, which is a personal choice. So some of those off-plan options, whether you have insurance or not, there are a few things to make it accessible. So you can, most people have heard about Talkspace. That's just like virtual visits with a licensed therapist that can help you. Usually you're talking through the phone. It's about $35 a week, and you can like stop or start at any time. There's also something called Open Path Collective, which is licensed therapists and counselors who donate their services, or don't donate, but offer them at a highly reduced cost for people in need. You don't have to submit any tax forms. There's no like proving it. It's all in an honor system. And the way that it works is you pay like a $59 one-time initiation fee. And then from then on, it's like on a sliding scale from about $30 to $60 per visit. And you can either do those virtually, or you can find a local provider and talk to them on the phone and see if they might be right for you. So those are two resources I've seen people use a lot. Also going through, I believe it's the AADA. They have a lot of places where to start, just in finding a local provider who will work with you on costs, kind of like negotiate things down based on your need. All of this to say, there are people who will work with you, again, if you are open with what your financial situation is and what you're looking for. Like Mr. Rogers said, look for the helpers. It is absolutely the case in the healthcare industry too. It's not usually on the insurance side, if I'm being totally honest, but especially as it applies to healthcare providers, and there are people working to make things more accessible.
Right. Well, and like we were talking about, like don't deny yourself the help that you do need, and that
Exactly.
Yeah, and that's I mean that's part of the reason that this group is here to begin with, because I was too scared to ask for help about anything. I didn't want to talk
so
to
hard.
anybody. It's really intimidating. There's a lot of, and it's overwhelming, and so to admit something that you desperately need on top of that it makes you more vulnerable, and but it's something that people need to know is out there for them.
Absolutely.
So as we're looking to prepare to go and find a plan, like we've kind of run through the basics. We know what we're looking at. We know what the letters mean. Talk us through some of these things that are good to have prepared before you go find a plan.
Definitely. So as you're going in to look, the big things that you want to have is what you expect to need costs for. So then the details of that being the doctors you currently go to, like the person that you consider your family doctor. Like, I don't want anyone other than this person to give me a shot. You should absolutely filter your plans by that human. So any kind of prescriptions that you take regularly, because prescriptions can vary in price greatly by different plans. So that is one of the worst things to come across, to suddenly find out you're on a new plan and they don't cover this prescription at all. You have to pay out of pocket. Tragic. So any kind of specialist you think you may need to go to, which is particularly relevant for artists, because even if I'm totally guilty of this, being like, like I don't have to go to the doctor that much. It's not a big deal. But then, okay, what happens if halfway through the year you get a singing contract and then you need to find out from an ENT if you can do a show that night? A, does your plan allow for you to go to a specialist at all? B, if there's one that you would really like to go to that's in network, do they take your plan? Also, really great physical therapists near you for dancers, but also anyone who moves, uses their body, anyone like an orthopedic surgeon, really just making notes of not only that you can go to these people, but if you were to need them, who do your friends and family recommend? Who do people trust? This is your insurance plan that you are paying out of pocket for. Like, it's supposed to work for you. So as much as you can be prepared with how you would feel the best if you did need that care, to already have those people, like all of the boxes that you would need to check so that you can find the plan that checks as many of those boxes as possible, no matter how much or how little goes wrong. So that's big thing. Also, most plans that you look at will have a little tab that says plan details. And then when you scroll down, it'll have a list of like common occurrences or common situations that people have. One of them being like pregnancy / having a baby. It will go through what the average situation couple would pay, or a single individual, to go through that entire pregnancy and birth process, and like what those out-of-pocket costs would be. It'll also have like breaking an arm and going to the emergency room, just to have an idea in like real life terms on what you would actually be paying for that plan if something a little more like normal happened, but also not something that you think about every day.
Sure.
Because a big thing is just preparing for the unexpected. That's supposed to be the whole point of insurance, that like,
right.
And that's where that maximum out of pocket really comes into play, that if you look at that number and you see something that would wipe you out or put you in terrible debt, you need to go in and find something else, because if it's not going to make you feel more secure in case of something that put you in the hospital for a couple of weeks, then that plan's not working for you in the way that it should. So also any kind of tests or imaging that you think you might need to have, and this is definitely something that a lot of people don't think about, but things like MRIs that say you had like an ankle injury that was like messing with you, like bothering you. You thought maybe you would like to go to a physical therapist later, but weren't sure. You also should totally look at that plan and see what an MRI or X-ray would cost, because if you go to that orthopedic doctor, they're probably going to recommend that you get one of those imaging tests. And the last thing you want to do is be in the doctor's office, like frantically scrolling through your plan to see if you can even do that or how much it would cost.
Right.
So again, if you have anything that might come up that you think might require some of that imaging, any kind of MRI, X-ray, ultrasound, anything like that, definitely look down It'll also be in the copays or the plan details. It should have like an imaging cost. That's totally something to look at that is not always in the front of your mind.
Well, yeah,
Um,
you don't think about
yeah.
stuff like that. But those are good things to prepare like before choosing a plan. So what about after choosing a plan? Like if there are claims.
Yes. So you're always going to want to have, once you do find the right provider for you, they're going to have a find a provider link online. Have that as a shortcut on your phone so that if you are on the way to urgent care and you're in the Uber and you need to make sure that you're going to the right one, that you can click on the right thing and type it in immediately. Just to make sure that you know what's coming. But even better, to make a list of the places that are in network, kind of like the lists of specialist doctors, things like that. And to be totally open, a lot of times you will not find a plan that meets your financial needs and checks every single one of those boxes of doctors that you want to go to if everything is perfect, just with the way that people are divided up by networks. So once you do find the best plan for you and you know what network you are on, go through and see what urgent care you would like to go to, what's your second choice for specialists, things like that, just so that you have a list of where you can go and like you have that list on your phone or on your refrigerator or whatever. Also, what hospitals take your plan. Not all of them take all plans, which is huge to remember in case of an emergency. It's such a lame thing to have to think about, but it can make a huge difference. To be able to be like, no, I need to go to this one.
Right.
So, and then of course your insurance card, because things get a lot more complicated if you have lost that or don't know where it is. It seems like a silly thing, but I've definitely not had mine on hand when I needed it before.
This is a random question. Do places accept a picture of your insurance card?
Usually if it has like your subscriber ID and like
Hmm.
your group number, you should be fine.
So that would be, I mean, that's a good little,
Yeah,
like to
like
take a
in
picture of it, put it
case,
in your phone.
yeah,
Yeah,
like
save
in
it to a note
case
or
of
something within your
nothing
phone.
else. Exactly.
Yeah. I keep my AAA card in my wallet all the time, but I have it digitally on my phone just in case I don't have it with me. Uh,
I signed up for
because that
AAA like
that would
yesterday.
be my luck. Oh, look at you. It saved us a few times actually, which
Oh my
is
gosh.
hysterical.
It surely
Uh, my wife and I, our cars, both of them, their batteries died the exact same night. So the guy thought it was a joke when the AAA guy came out and had to replace both
what?
of the car batteries.
No, what are the odds?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh my
So
gosh.
real quick before we dive into some other saving opportunities and that, if anybody's watching and wants to ask a specific question, go ahead and drop those in
Yes.
now. There's a couple other things that I wrote down that I want to touch on, but if you have a specific question, I want to make sure that we answer them live here. Uh, but otherwise, let's go ahead and move on to some other good savings opportunities. And you have some links for some of these in that Google Doc that you're going to throw into the group.
Yeah, I
Um,
definitely do.
but talk us through some of these extra tips.
Yeah, so I'm not going to go quite as in depth on the things that I have linked, but specifically the things that are like personal advice, I'm going to make sure to touch on. So
Hmm.
there's a lot of aid that you can get for prescriptions specifically. A lot of people have heard about GoodRx. Like it's not just some random whack app that doesn't work. Like it actually is a great resource. Where you can just download it, enter in the cost of your medicines. It'll tell you the best pharmacy to go to. So there are a few other apps like that and help you can get with prescriptions. So a big thing again with having a plan that works for you is knowing that once you're in a provider's network, they have perks for that exact reason because like they want to keep you, they want to keep you signing on. So a lot of them will have like bonus programs for healthy living that like you can get a gift card if you like go have a visit with your primary care doctor and like get a checkup, or like if you log healthy eating. It's like totally random stuff, but
It's like
definitely
saving money on your car insurance because
it's
you're a safe driver.
It is exactly like that.
If you're taking like healthy action,
Yep.
then the health insurance companies will reward you such. We had that, through Disney. There were a couple programs that did exactly the same thing.
Yeah, so it's like it's great incentive to do things like that anyway, or if you already do, like, oh my gosh, get paid. So definitely check with your provider. Blue Cross Blue Shield does a ton of that stuff. So if you're with them, definitely look into it. They'll also send out gift cards sometimes. I recently got a gift card from Blue Cross Blue Shield just for it's like an extra credit that they got through the Affordable Care Act. But I didn't even know about it until someone else had told me about it, and mine had gotten lost in the mail. So I would have never even known, and I would have never gotten it. So
it's because you lost your insurance card. That's why.
Oh my gosh, it is. So as totally lame as it is to like follow your health insurance provider on Facebook, I really would recommend it because they will let people know when they've done things like that, like look out in the mail for this thing that we sent out to all the people with a silver plan, just so you kind of know if something like that is coming down the pipe. They also will have newsletters for chronic conditions, things like asthma, and they'll send something out maybe every month with like extra ways to save, like discounts on things like nebulizers, and we'll have helpful links and stuff like that. So especially if you have a condition that you're managing all the time, that's totally something to look into. Okay, and then as it comes to, this is more like advice stuff, but when you're in an appointment with your doctor, so the key is, again, just like being honest. Like, it is hard. It sucks. I don't like doing it, but it really, like, that is what they're there for. And there are resources. So say you're having like concerns about managing costs, about like your prescriptions, you can do a couple things. You can ask to see if they're available in 90-day supplies instead of 30. That can be like a big discount. You can ask them if they have any free samples of any prescriptions you currently take. They have like medical salespeople come into their office all the time and like dump off a million free samples of medicines. So if you're like, hey, I'm having trouble paying for this. Like, do you have any samples of it right now? They're usually happy to go check. And if they have them, you can get a free month or two for free even. So you can also ask your doctor if there's like an approved, again, like it has to be safe and they're not going to recommend something to you that's not. But if there's something that they recommend you taking, this particularly applies to things like prenatal vitamins. But if they're recommending that you take something and it's really expensive through a prescription, you can say, hey, is there an over-the-counter alternative that I can take for this that's still going to be good for what I need it for? And usually your doctor will be happy to go through those options with you and be honest with you whether there is or isn't. Like, it's going to be different for any situation, but it is always helpful to ask just in case.
Well, sure. I mean, my dad always said the worst they can say is no. So you're better off asking.
Absolutely. And in the same way, if you are, say if you're at the doctor and they do recommend that you get an x-ray and you have a plan that doesn't cover it and you really just don't think that you can do that cost right now, just be honest and talk to them about your concerns. You have a few things. They could find out another way to evaluate what's going on. They could delay it if it's not something that's super urgent, again, on doctor's recommendation only, or they can negotiate that cost down with you as an out-of-pocket, like as a cash rate. A lot of doctors will negotiate different procedures down. So then there are patient assistant programs, which is another one of those things linked. It's similar to things like GoodRx, but it's also like procedures. If you need something done, whether or not you have insurance, you can type that in and see where you can go near you that's going to do that for a low cost and be willing to work with you. So also, if you get a bill, read it. They are not fun to read. Read it thoroughly. It's still people typing them up. People can make an error at any time. And if there is one, call them and say, fix it. This is my money. This is my plan. Y'all are working for me. Um,
Yeah.
so definitely make sure, because mistakes can happen. People are human. They're doing a million things a day.
Hmm.
Also, with out-of-pocket costs in general, negotiate them. Like you said, the worst that they can say is no. It also will not be the first time anyone has heard it. People do negotiate these things all the time. It's so intimidating. You can also, if a claim is denied, you can file a formal appeal. If you really think that this is something that should be covered, you can also talk to your doctor about writing you a letter of necessity to your insurance company. And usually, if an insurance company receives a letter from a doctor saying, hey, this person needed this and this is why, that can help you big time. So also, with negotiating out-of-pocket costs, you can sign up for a free health advocate to help you with that exact thing, negotiating costs, appealing a claim. That's going to be one of those links in the Google Doc too. So you can sign up for someone whose job it is to help you get these costs down and make sure that your health costs are manageable no matter what's going on, even if it's like an unanticipated hospital stay. Also, know when to visit the urgent care instead of the ER. This, I'm sure people hear this all the time, but the difference between those two copays is usually massive, like 2 or 3 times. So also, urgent cares do close at a certain time of the night. So there's definitely like that period. But if you're in doubt, probably going to an urgent care is going to get you out quicker. You're going to have more specific care, because there isn't going to be like some really urgent case coming in that everyone has to drop everything and deal with right at that moment. So it also helps the staffs of emergency rooms. So it's just being cognizant of what requires what kind of care. Obviously, if you're bleeding, go to the emergency room. But sometimes for things like, say you get like a nasty stomach bug and like you really need a Zofran prescription, normally you can go to an urgent care and get that a lot faster. Or telemedicine, which is the bomb these days and is now showing up everywhere. So also just don't let health issues escalate. Like a lot of industries, just like, this is totally different, but car maintenance or something like that, it really pays off in the long run to get like the kind of annoying, like more frequent visits done. Totally applies with healthcare costs too. If you go to your doctor and they feel a lump and you can get it checked out on the way earlier side and like get it all taken care of, that can be like a life-changing difference for you.
Yeah, I read a quote recently, and I'm gonna butcher it, and my wife is gonna tell me later tonight that I butchered it. But it's something like if you don't invest in your health now, you'll be forced to pay for it later.
Absolutely. You didn't butcher
Yeah.
that at all. I feel like that was the exact quote. No,
Well,
it
maybe
is,
it was.
check it. No, so that is like absolutely so true. And care avoidance is a big problem these days, just with like the healthcare costs being some big unknown. And the more that you understand your plan, the more that you understand who you want to go to and what they can provide you, and having a number in your head of what you're going to owe and how you can manage that is going to be something that then helps you make that decision of like, oh, this has been feeling weird for a while. I'm just going to go to the doctor. I'm just going to go tomorrow. That can end up making that decision so much easier and so much less stressful than being like, I don't have $300. I have no idea how much it's going to cost. I don't know who to call.
Right. It's really about not denying yourself the help that you do need, you know,
Absolutely.
and And yeah, and I have a few questions I'll ask. But
Yeah,
again, for anybody watching, if you have questions, go ahead and drop them, and then we'll talk through those. But
totally.
to cover a couple things, first of all, um, this is such an important thing, and especially when it comes to finances too, because the number one cause of bankruptcy in our country is medical bills.
Right.
I mean, I want to say it's close to 50% of all the cases is has to do with medical bills. So it's definitely something to take seriously, but it's those unforeseens or those things that we don't expect
You don't,
that
yeah,
we didn't plan for in our insurance plans that end up really affecting us negatively financially. So those are important to look at. So one of the most important things to look at is and you touched on this, is the max out of pocket.
hmm,
Um, and even if that number is something that scares you, if it says 20,000, okay, if that scares you, but if you're still able to afford a plan, if that's the cheapest plan
right.
that you can find, don't let the 20,000 number scare you, because the
Is
$600,000
so much worse.
bill
Right.
is so much worse, that if it's going to get bad, it will get bad, because chances are,
Exactly.
if you're going that far, it's like if you're spending a
It'll
hundred
rack
thousand
up so
dollars on
bad.
a car accident, you're probably not stopping at 100,000. It's probably going to be more than that in the long
Absolutely.
run. So that's definitely something. Um, I love what you said, and you said it multiple times, but I love what you said about it being you kept saying it's your plan. And I think that empowers people, and I think that that's important to reiterate, is that it's your plan. So make the plan work for you. So there's a lot of different moving pieces, but that's why we're doing things like this. That's why we have experts in the group to talk through these questions, but adjust those levels in order to work for you and what it is that you need. Um, and so anyway, I love that you say that it's your plan, because I haven't really heard it like that before, and I think that that's important. But
Yeah,
one of the
it's
things for my wife and I that makes it our plan, or something that affects us, is that we are open to starting a family, and so that's going to affect. So I didn't know if you could or wanted to touch on pregnancy or maternity as just kind
yeah,
of a small little topic, because I know that that's something that some other families are dealing with,
absolutely.
and
Yeah,
because it's personal to me, I think it's worth talking about.
absolutely. It's personal to me too, indirectly. My nephew is 2 now, and I'm like
Mm,
super involved in his life, as you know, as much as an aunt can be, and have kind of like been there through the process. So pregnancy and maternity is a pre-existing condition. So whatever plan, if you are open to starting a family, you need to know that either that those costs are going to come out of pocket, which like is a pretty risky move to make. Even if you think that you're going to be having a midwife or a doula, if something happens and you do need to go to the hospital and have that 3-day stay, that's all on you. Um, so even if you are making those more holistic choices as far as like the maternity process, I do think that it's still really crucial to have coverage should you need immediate care, and even if that's just having savings up if you really don't want to go with a plan that covers pre-existing conditions. Just again, like knowing what can happen and being ready for it. But for most people, I definitely recommend something that is going to cover pregnancy and maternity as a pre existing condition, no questions asked, which is going to be any kind of Affordable Care Act compliant plan. So, then something that my brother and sister in law did is when you are specifically when you find out that you're expecting, but also just if you're open to it, specifically if you have an HSA. I think they made the decision to put it in an FSA because that was what they had. But of course, since it doesn't roll over, that's like tough to plan for.
right.
So, but they pretty much maxed that out on the year that they were expecting a child, because a lot of kind of little known maternity, like I don't want to say gadgets, but it's the only thing that's really coming to mind, but just little things that you need that make the process easier. Maybe going to a doctor who's not in network, having that extra tax-free money to spend on anything that just may come up. Also, I'm almost positive that diapers are an HSA, FSA qualified expense. So like that can be pretty top-notch. So those are the two big things that I would recommend for people who are open to starting a family, and just making sure that your personal health insurance covers infants immediately. Some plans are after 14 days. So that's just something to check on immediately, especially if you're going off marketplace. Yeah, it's a weird one.
Because nothing happens in the first 14 days. It only happens after the first 14 days. That's so silly. It's just about making it work from you. Hannah, thank you for telling us who you are. So
I meant to touch on Cobra. I'm crazy. I'm so glad she brought this up. Hi, Hannah. Thank you.
Well, she's our mom, so she's going to make sure that we all do things correctly. Is Cobra a waste of time to consider? I've used it in the past and it was affordable, but all anyone says about it now is that it's absurdly expensive.
Here's the thing. I mean, no, it's not a waste of time to consider. Again, it's just going to be your personal health needs. So the great thing about Cobra is that it is a continuation of that group health insurance, and the group health insurance is going to be the best coverage for the lowest dollar amount. So if you have a lot of healthcare costs that are coming up a lot, like this is the situation in which I would say, heck yeah, do Cobra, absolutely enact it, is you have a whole lot of healthcare costs. You make too much for a government subsidy. Because if you make too much for a subsidy, you're looking at $600, $700, $800 for a plan anyway, even up to $1,000 if you are going to the doctor regularly. So the thing about Cobra that makes it expensive is that usually an employer is paying a certain percentage of that premium, and then you're paying the other half, not half, percent. So then if you enact Cobra, you're paying the entire cost. So what you were paying plus whatever your employer was paying, plus like a 2% enactment charge. So it's really just a matter of comparing it side by side, because if you don't qualify for subsidies, I can definitely see Cobra being a more affordable option. I'm not going to say like affordable, but I think it's always worth looking into. And also just if you have the money on hand and don't want to worry about it, you want to have your same network, your same doctors, you've got enough other stuff going on in your life that you are cool with investing in making sure that you have the care that you've had the whole time you're at the employer, then that's absolutely the time to do it.
So it's definitely something that needs, you have to kind of compare that. I know for me and Ashley, we put in what was like most important to us and what we wanted to make sure was covered. And I mean, for us to go through Cobra individually was, I mean, together as a couple, it was almost $1,700 a month for the two of us together. 15 to 17, something like that. And we found even through the marketplace, because we are open to a family and we wanted something that covers that, even something on the marketplace is half that, more than half or less than half that. So it's a big savings, and we're still paying the full amount because we're projecting that we would be over that amount anyway next year. So yeah, you really have to kind of weigh them side by side.
Yeah. And for a while, there was like a lot of lobbying going on for there to be a subsidy for anyone's Cobra premiums during this time. It's something that Be an Arts Hero was really working for. Would be awesome if that happened at some point, especially for the actors equity members that are losing coverage. It would be great if that were to happen. But again, you can't hold your breath for that kind of thing.
Right. The last question that I wrote down is just kind of out of curiosity. In the beginning, we were talking about HMO versus PPO networks. So the HMO is the one it's more condensed, it's more specific, and then the PPO is a broader network.
Yeah.
But it doesn't necessarily mean that your PCP or your primary care physician isn't available on both of those.
Yes, absolutely.
Right.
So you can, again, when you're filtering plans, you can do like filter it through this provider. It'll say like find my providers. So yes, there are absolutely doctors who are available on both. Or I'm sorry, I don't live in Florida, so I don't know like specifically the hospital networks, but like the big hospital and doctor networks here are
Sure.
like,
Down here we have Advent Health and we have Orlando Health, and those are the two big ones.
Totally. So different plans can still offer you access to one of those. Like more than one plan can give you access to the Advent Health network. So like there can be overlap. It's more about who you think that you'll need to go to, and if it would like really super inconvenience you to have to get a referral to go to a specialist, even though that's kind of like going out to, that's not always the case anymore. And you can get a telemedicine referral a lot of times too. So don't let that scare you about an HMO. It's not like a hard and fast rule. It's just like a disclaimer.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing all this and for talking to us. I know that this is super helpful, and there's been so much information. If you guys would see all these notes for information that was given today, and then you're also going to drop a link or a document into the group that has a lot of these helpful links and sources. So these are those calculators, deducting medical expenses for self-employed, community charity, pharmacy finders, all kinds of information and helpful stuff. So be on the lookout for that Google Doc as well. And remember what we've all learned today, which is it's your plan.
Yes.
So make it work for you. Yeah.
Awesome.
So,
thank you so much.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Yeah.
And we'll see you all later.
Thank you so much for sticking with us through the video. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Carey Blackburn. There's so much information in that video that you just watched. So I hope you were able to learn something, and I hope that it made you want to ask more questions, because that's what this is about, is just about learning, right? More information. As always, hit like, hit subscribe, and join us for the next video. Hope to see you around.